She never meant to draw attention, but the moment Lauren slid that napkin across the table, the word help shaking beneath her fingertips, everything in the restaurant shifted. 2 cartel enforcers were already closing in, and at table 12, a man with dark, unreadable eyes rose slowly, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. One gesture from him changed the entire night, and her entire life. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know he was the most dangerous ally she could ever have. Before we begin, if you believe that every woman deserves to be saved in her darkest moment, make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. 3 women had vanished in Jersey City in just 6 weeks. And by the time the police shrugged and moved on, I was the only one still awake at 2 in the morning, staring at their faces until they felt burned into the back of my eyelids. Their names glowed on my laptop screen inside my cramped Hoboken apartment, the radiator clicking like a nervous heartbeat behind me. Michelle Torres, 24, disappeared after a bartending shift. Sarah Kim, 22, left behind a neatly organized room and a vintage camera she treated like a child. Amanda Wells, 26, bounced through 3 restaurants in 4 months before vanishing into the same silence that swallowed the others. The officials called them runaways, young women drowning in debt who'd simply slipped away. But Michelle had texted her mother about Sunday brunch the day before she vanished, excited about a new apartment she'd finally saved enough for. Sarah's roommate told me she left everything she loved, laptop, notebooks, camera lined up like she planned to return after work. Amanda's cousin said she'd been jumpy those last days, carrying fear like a weight she wouldn't explain. These weren't women running toward anything. They were running from something or never given the chance to run at all. For 2 weeks I barely slept 4 hours a night, living on coffee that tasted like burnt rubber and the kind of determination that makes people reckless. My editor, Mark Sullivan from the Jersey Tribune, warned me the way seasoned reporters warn the young. Quietly, sincerely, like someone speaking from a grave they'd narrowly avoided. "Be careful, Lauren," he'd said, leaning back in his chair. "People who chase organized crime stories usually don't get to chase many." But he still handed me a contact in the Port Authority. And that contact gave me shipping manifests and notes on surveillance blind spots, breadcrumbs that formed a constellation if you stared long enough. All 3 women worked within a 2-mile radius of the port. All had debt. All had been offered better jobs in the weeks before disappearing. I traced their last movements through credit card records, security footage, and interviews with coworkers. Every trail, no matter how different, curved toward the same dead place on the map, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the port, slumped between functioning facilities like a rotting tooth in an otherwise healthy mouth. And that was where the story and danger truly began. The first time I drove past the warehouse, I didn't stop. I just eased my battered Honda along the cracked asphalt, windows down despite the March cold, camera resting in my lap like a second pulse. The building leaned into the night, its broken windows staring back like hollow eyes. Graffiti curled up the walls in tangled colors, and nothing moved, not wind, not shadows, not hope. It looked abandoned, forgotten, irrelevant, which made it perfect for the kind of operation nobody wanted found. The second night I parked 3 blocks away and walked. The air smelled of salt and rust, and the chain-link fence pressed cold against my palms as I photographed the structure from a distance. At 11:47 p.m., 2 black SUVs with no plates rolled to a stop beside a side entrance. 4 men climbed out, speaking a language I later confirmed was Spanish, moving with tense purpose. They disappeared inside for 23 minutes, and when they emerged, something in their posture had shifted: less caution, more certainty. By the 3rd night, I'd borrowed a telephoto lens from a photographer friend who owed me a favor. I set up on the roof of a nearby building, the metal freezing beneath my elbows as I watched. Then, near midnight, something happened that made the cold settle deep into my bones. A line of women, heads down, shoulders bent, were escorted from one building to another. They moved like paper dolls, fragile and interchangeable in the darkness. I took 63 photos, hands trembling even though I didn't realize it then. Only back home, importing the images, did I notice the details that turned this from a missing persons pattern into something far more monstrous. In photo 37, a man stood fully illuminated by headlights, his face angled toward my lens as if sensing he was being watched, sharp cheekbones, hard eyes, a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. In photo 42, he was directing others, and a metallic glint at his hip left no doubt what he was carrying. Without meaning to, I had documented what looked like human trafficking and captured the faces of the men running it. It was enough to terrify me, enough to make me hesitate. But by morning, fear had settled into a familiar place in my ribs, and determination filled the rest. I sent Mark a handful of the images and a message. Need a few more days to confirm details. What I didn't tell him was that this story was already bigger than anything I had ever touched, and bigger than anything I was prepared for. By the time I stepped back into the city's daylight, I felt the invisible line I'd crossed tightening around me. The silver sedan showed up that same afternoon, a newer Nissan with tinted windows, parked across from my building when I left for my part-time shift at the coffee shop. At 7 that evening it was still there, engine off, windows dark, presence unmistakably intentional. Maybe coincidence, I told myself. But instinct, 5 years of investigative reporting and 27 years of learning when to listen to my gut, kept insisting it wasn't. I didn't take a picture, didn't confront the car. Just memorized the make, the model, the subtle scratch near the rear door and changed my routes. I checked over my shoulder, locked doors I usually left open, learned to live inside the tension of being watched. By Monday, the breakthrough came from a place I hadn't expected. Amanda Wells wasn't just the third woman on my list. She was Michelle Torres's second cousin. She had been orbiting the same danger the others never escaped. She'd worked the same places, taken the same late shifts, received the same two-good job offers that sounded harmless on the surface but carried the weight of something sinister underneath. Except Amanda was still alive, still moving, still running. I found her through the unwritten restaurant worker network, The Grapevine. Someone at the dock said she was at Lucia's now, the upscale place where the lighting was warm, the wine expensive, and the clientele carried briefcases instead of backpacks. I called the restaurant, asked for her by name. When she picked up, her voice was tight, filtered through suspicion. "My name is Lauren Reed," I said quietly. "I'm a journalist. I'm investigating the disappearances of Michelle Torres and Sarah Kim. I know you were close to Michelle, and I think you might be in danger." Silence stretched so long the air felt thin. I thought she'd hung up. Then, barely audible, "I can't talk here. Come Thursday night. After 9. Back dining room. Amanda." Thursday. That was all she gave me before the line cut. I should have felt relief, a lead, a survivor willing to talk. But instead, dread pooled in my stomach, heavy and cold, because meeting her meant stepping directly into whatever she'd been trying for months to outrun. And when Thursday night came, I had no idea that walking into Lucia's would be the moment everything snapped into place and began to spiral. Lucia's looked warm from the outside, all soft light and polished glass, the kind of restaurant where people felt safe enough to laugh loudly over overpriced pasta. Inside, the air carried the familiar blend of garlic, wine, and low conversations, normalcy wrapped in ambience. I asked the hostess for a table in the back, the quiet section with only 4 tables, and she led me there with a practiced smile. I ordered coffee I didn't intend to drink. My stomach was too tight for anything else. At 8:53, Amanda slipped out from the kitchen and I recognized her immediately. Curly dark hair pulled back. Brown eyes that had seen too much. She caught my gaze, gave a small nod, then vanished again like someone afraid of being caught standing still. This was progress, I told myself. A witness. A survivor. But the room felt colder now, like something had shifted just out of sight. D912. The world narrowed. Two men stepped into Lucia's, moving like they belonged to a different gravity. They didn't admire the space or look for a menu. They scanned exits, corners, shadows. One of them carried a face I knew too well, scars slicing through his left eyebrow, carved into my memory from photo 37. The enforcer from the warehouse. My coffee cup rattled against its saucer when I set it down. They hadn't looked my way yet, but they would. I was alone in the back. Alone and visible. Amanda came out again with plates for another table, and our eyes met. She saw what I saw. Fear washed over her so fast it felt like a warning shot. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe. But leaving meant passing them, bathrooms to the right, kitchen directly in front of their table. No exit that didn't walk straight into their line of sight. My phone was buried in my purse. Calling 911 would do nothing. Suspicious men wasn't a crime, and time had already slipped thin. Amanda appeared beside me so suddenly I jumped. She set down a water glass I hadn't ordered. Her voice was a whisper trembling against the panic she was fighting. They've been asking about someone who looks like you. Someone photographing the port. You need to go. Now. I can't, I murmured. They're between me and the door. Amanda's eyes darted around the room, searching for a miracle in a place that had none. My pulse thrashed in my throat. I grabbed a napkin from the dispenser, pulled out the pen I always carried, and wrote a single word in thick block letters. Help. I placed it on the table where the whole restaurant could see. A lifeline thrown into a storm I no longer controlled. Amanda stared at it, horrified. I leaned toward her. If I don't make it out, meet me at the 24-hour diner on Grove Street at 10:30. If I'm not there, tell everything you know. She fled toward the kitchen, and the two men stood, not approaching yet, but ready, calculating, deciding. I felt the walls closing in, my story collapsing into the same silence that had swallowed Michelle and Sarah, and then someone else noticed the napkin. Table 12 sat in the middle of the dining room, four men in tailored suits, their posture too alert to belong to businessmen unwinding over dinner. I hadn't paid them attention before, not when fear narrowed my world to two cartel enforcers moving like shadows with intent. But now one man at the head of the table had turned fully toward me, gaze sharp, unblinking, taking me in like he was reading a coded message only he could decipher. His hair was dark, swept back with the kind of ease that comes from never needing to impress anyone. His face held unforgiving angles softened only by the intensity in his eyes, dark, focused, watching me, watching the napkin, watching the men who had finally begun to move again. He saw everything. And in the span of 3 seconds, his expression changed from curiosity to understanding to decision. He made a gesture so subtle it could have been mistaken for straightening his jacket. But the men flanking him rose instantly, shifting into new positions that blocked the aisle between me and the approaching enforcers. It was orchestrated with a fluidity that felt rehearsed, practiced, lethal. The man from table 12 pushed back his chair and stood, moving toward me with a quiet confidence that made the air thicken. He didn't hurry, didn't posture. He simply closed the distance as if he were stepping into a conversation he'd been invited to join. When he reached my table, he sat across from me without asking and picked up the napkin with the word help scrawled across it. He folded it neatly, slid it into his jacket pocket, and lifted his gaze to mine. "You're having a difficult evening," he said, voice low and steady, a faint Mediterranean undertone threading through his flawless English. His eyes didn't waver. "I'm going to help you. But you need to do exactly as I say. Do you understand? Words felt too heavy to form. I nodded. Lauren, I managed. My name is Lauren Reed. Lauren, he repeated, as though testing how it fit in his mouth. I'm Gabriel. He tilted his head slightly toward the men frozen mid-approach. Those men. Do you know why they're looking for you? I'm a journalist, I whispered. I've been investigating disappearances near the port. I took photos. I think I caught them on camera. Something flickered behind Gabriel's expression, recognition, calculation, maybe both. He glanced at the enforcers who were now held at bay by his men, a silent standoff stretching taut across the restaurant. They're going to leave, he said, rising. But this isn't over. They know your face. They know your habits. Your life just became very small if you walk out of here alone. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder, guiding me out of my chair with a touch that wasn't forceful, just certain. Gather your things. You're coming with me. Stay close. The enforcers watched as we approached, their expressions shifting from suspicion to something darker. One slid his hand inside his jacket, and tension cracked in the air like static. But Gabriel's men stepped between us, forming a silent wall. After a long beat, the scarred enforcer pulled his hand back out empty. He gave Gabriel a single sharp nod, a promise of future confrontation, and walked out into the rain. His partner followed. Gabriel didn't release my shoulder until we were outside, where a black SUV idled at the curb, headlights carving through the storm. He opened the back door and guided me inside. Drive, he told the man in the front seat. Fort Lee, the secure location. And just like that, I realized I hadn't escaped danger. I had stepped directly into its arms. The SUV sliced through the rain like a blade, wipers beating a frantic rhythm as the city blurred into streaks of gray and sodium light. I pressed back against the leather seat, pulse still hammering from the encounter inside Lucia's. Gabriel sat beside me, composed in a way that felt almost unreal, his presence radiating the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume to be heard. For several long minutes, neither of us spoke. The storm filled the silence for us. When he finally did speak, it was with a calm that made the truth land even harder. My name is Gabriel Ricchetti, he said. My family controls port operations in this region. 3 generations. The words fell cleanly, stripped of disguise. The men who wanted you, they don't work for me. They work for people attempting to take what's ours. The realization hit me like a cold splash. Mafia. I had asked a Mafia boss for help, written help on a napkin like a message in a bottle, and he'd answered. Gabriel didn't seem bothered by the weight of the revelation. He studied me with a focus that felt clinical, assessing damage, calculating risk. You photographed their operation, he continued. Faces they can't afford to have exposed. That makes you a priority target. The SUV climbed toward Fort Lee, passing from city streets into quieter neighborhoods where rain pooled in dark, glistening sheets. When we finally pulled into the underground garage of a modern building with tinted glass and heavy steel doors, the world felt too quiet, too still. Gabriel guided me upstairs to an apartment that looked nothing like the safe house I'd expected. It was bright, clean, almost hotel-like except for the reinforced door, the triple locks, the security monitors showing camera feeds outside the building. Bulletproof windows, he explained. A guard station 24/7 outside. His name is Luca. He's been with the family for 12 years. He'll keep you safe. The reassurance didn't stop the nausea building in my throat. Inside the bathroom, I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles whitened. The reflection staring back looked younger than 27. Hair damp from rain, mascara smudged, exhaustion carved under my eyes. I looked like someone who had stepped far beyond her depth when I emerged, Gabriel was standing near the window, framed by the glow of the city below. "You're safe here," he said, turning toward me. Not gentle, just precise. "Nobody will reach you." I wanted to ask why he was helping me, why he cared, but the words tangled and fear broke through instead. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Mark. I called him back, lying more smoothly than I expected. "I'm safe. I'll explain tomorrow." That night, when the apartment finally fell silent, I opened my laptop and started researching the man who had just altered the entire trajectory of my life. Gabriel Ricchetti, a name threaded through decades of port influence, legitimate and not. A family with rules, boundaries, lines they didn't cross, including human trafficking. He'd taken over after his father's assassination 8 years ago. 36. Never married. No children. A ghost in public records but unmistakable in the shadows. As I scrolled through old articles, one truth settled like a stone in my chest. The system had failed Michelle, Sarah, and Amanda long before I arrived. And now I was trusting a man outside that system, one who lived in gray spaces the law couldn't reach. But Gabriel's world was the first one that hadn't shrugged when I asked for help. Morning arrived, muted through the bulletproof windows, a dull gray light settling over the safe house like a held breath. I hadn't slept. My brain kept looping images: the warehouse, the line of women, the scarred enforcer's face, Gabriel folding the help napkin so calmly you'd think he did that sort of thing every night. When the door finally opened, Gabriel stepped in carrying 2 cups of coffee from a place that clearly took pride in their craft. The aroma alone felt like a promise of clarity. "You didn't sleep," he observed, handing me 1 cup. His tone wasn't pity, more like someone assessing the next move in a game he intended to win. He sat across from me, watching in silence until I had a sip strong enough to stab through my fog. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. No details left out." So I told him about Michelle's texts before she disappeared, about Sarah's abandoned camera, about Amanda's fear, about the shipping manifests, the SUVs, the warehouse, the photos, the silver sedan that had followed me for days. The more I spoke, the darker Gabriel's expression became. Anger simmering beneath a surface he kept unnervingly still. When I finished, he stood abruptly, pacing to the window like he needed distance from the room. "This has been happening for 3 months, he said quietly. "They've been taking women from restaurants, bars, anywhere young girls work late, bringing them to that warehouse, processing them before moving them south." He turned jaw-locked. 17 women. Not 3. 17. The number hit like a physical blow. My throat tightened. 17. "Your 3 are part of something bigger," he said. "Much bigger." He returned to the table, leaning forward, eyes fixed on mine with the intensity of someone preparing to redraw the rules of an entire war. "And now that you've seen their faces, they will not stop until they silence you." The truth settled cold and sharp. "Then we go to the police. The FBI. Someone." Gabriel shook his head. "And wait through weeks of paperwork? Internal politics? Jurisdiction fights?" His voice hardened. "While more women disappear. No. The system is slow. Corrupted. Predictable. The cartel knows exactly how to slip through it." He paused. "I don't cross certain lines. Human trafficking is one of them. But they have violated my territory. And that, Lauren, is a declaration of war." My pulse kicked hard. "War isn't the answer." "It's the only answer," he countered. "But not the way you think." He leaned back, assessing me. "I'm not suggesting murder. I'm suggesting dismantling their operation fast, clean, permanent. And then you publish everything. Force federal action after the victims are already safe." I hesitated. He was asking me to trust a criminal with moral lines only he could see. But I saw the faces in my photos. I saw the line of women in the dark. And I saw how the world responded when girls like them went missing. They weren't important enough to save. "What do you need from me?" I whispered. "Everything," Gabriel said. "Every file, every photo, every timeline. And your trust that I won't use any of it against you later." The request shouldn't have felt steadying, but it did. Because for the first time since this began, someone wasn't telling me to stop digging. Someone wasn't minimizing these women's lives. Someone wasn't turning away. He was ready to burn down anything that threatened them. And that was the moment I understood the truth. I wasn't stepping out of danger. I was stepping into the center of it. The next days blurred into a rhythm that felt nothing like my old life. Gabriel moved through the safe house with the precision of someone who'd spent years making decisions that determined who lived and who didn't. He visited twice daily, always bringing food I would never have afforded myself. Thai curries fragrant with lemongrass, pasta from restaurants that required reservations I'd never even dream of. He didn't stay long. Just long enough to ask what I needed, long enough to check the tension in my shoulders, long enough to remind me this alliance meant something to him. Meanwhile, I turned the apartment into a war room. Timelines spread across the table. 17 profiles arranged like a silent jury. My photos numbered, tagged, catalogs sprawled across my laptop. I built the case piece by piece, turning fragments into a map of a crime no one had acknowledged. But there was something else forming in the spaces between our work. A pull neither of us named, but both felt. I caught him watching me more than once, studying the way I pieced clues together. The way I rubbed the bridge of my nose when I was frustrated. The way I refused to stop even when exhaustion gnawed at my edges. And I watched him too, watched how he carried a weight that never fully left his shoulders, how he spoke with quiet authority, how he looked at me like I was a problem he wanted to solve and a woman he shouldn't touch. It broke open the night he brought dinner and lingered longer than usual. After we ate, he stood to leave but paused at the door. I could feel him wrestling with something, the air shifting just slightly. "Why are you helping me?" I finally asked. "Really?" He didn't answer at first. Then he turned, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe, expression stripped down to honesty. "You asked for help," he said quietly. "Most people never ask. Not in my world." He looked away for a moment, jaw tight. "And because you're trying to save women nobody else cared enough to save. That matters." His vulnerability surprised me, disarming in its simplicity. Before I could respond, dawn broke into the fourth day. Gabriel showed up earlier than usual, not with food this time, but with urgency tightening every line of his body. "It's confirmed," he said. "The cartel's been using that warehouse to process women before moving them south. They've been operating 3 months. 17 victims." The number still hurt every time it was spoken. But then he said something that shifted the entire axis between us. "We're stopping them," he told me. "Together." That night, rain hammered the windows as if trying to punch through the glass. Gabriel chose the worst moment to hand me a garment bag inside. An emerald dress that shimmered under the lights. "There's a benefit tonight," he said. "I need to make an appearance. You're coming with me." I protested. He dismissed it with a look. "You being seen with me sends a message. You're under my protection. If they touch you, they touch me." His voice dropped lower. "And no one touches what's under my protection." The Waldorf was a different universe, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the soft hum of people who never feared the dark corners of the world. Gabriel introduced me as a writer covering port modernization, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back, each touch claiming me in ways I tried not to feel. When a drunk businessman pressed in too close, Gabriel stepped between us with the kind of quiet fury that made the air tilt. "The lady declined," he said. It wasn't a threat, but something deeper, a boundary drawn with the certainty of a man who didn't lose battles. The car ride back to Fort Lee was thick with unspoken tension. The city lights smeared across the windows as the SUV cut through the night. I stared at the blur, breathing hard, trying to calm the adrenaline still pumping through me. "You didn't need to do that," I said finally. He turned to me, voice low, steady. "I did. You shouldn't have to handle men like him alone." Silence, stretched, charged, and fragile. Then he said it. "We need to address what's happening between us." "What's happening?" I began, but the words evaporated when he leaned in, eyes flicking to my mouth as though fighting himself. His voice was rough. "You're intelligent, brave, infuriatingly principled, and you make me want things I told myself I was done wanting." I kissed him before he could finish the sentence. His breath caught. Then he broke hands in my hair, pulling me closer, kissing me with a kind of desperation that tasted like months of restraint snapping apart in an instant. The driver cleared his throat when we reached the garage, but the spell didn't break. We barely made it into the apartment before the rest unraveled, his jacket on the floor, my dress pooling like silk around my ankles, our bodies finding each other with a hunger that left no room for fear. Later, tangled in the dark with his breath warm against my shoulder, the world felt impossibly quiet. I thought of all the lines I'd crossed, all the compromises I'd made. Loving a criminal, trusting him, wanting him, it complicated everything. But in that moment, I didn't regret a single choice, because tomorrow, the war we had stepped into would demand more from us than either of us had yet realized. Morning arrived with the soft clink of ceramic. Gabriel set a cup of coffee beside me, the steam twisting upward like a fragile promise. For a moment, the world felt deceptively normal, sunlight slipping across the floor, his bare feet silent against the hardwood. But there was something held back in his expression, something tightly controlled beneath the surface. I sat up slowly, tension already coiling in my chest. "There's something you should know," he said, settling into the chair opposite the bed. His tone was measured, but the edges were sharp enough to cut. 3 days ago, there was an incident. Cartel enforcers intercepted one of my shipments near the port. They were trying to send a message. The words hit like a slap. 3 days ago? My voice cracked at the edges. "And you didn't think to mention this?" "It wasn't relevant," he said. "Not unless it affected your safety." He spoke with calm certainty, but the calm only made my pulse spike harder. My anger rose fast, bright, and unfiltered. "Not relevant?" I stood abruptly, blanket slipping away. "They confronted your people, Gabriel. They were close enough to attack one of your shipments. How close were they to this apartment?" 2 miles. He didn't flinch. "Different location entirely." 2 miles, I repeated. "You've been telling me we're partners in this, but you're still deciding what information I'm allowed to know." The room felt too small, his presence too heavy. "I don't need protection from the truth. I need honesty." He pushed to his feet, jaw ticking once. "I was protecting you from unnecessary fear." "Fear keeps me alive," I shot back. "Blinding me doesn't." My voice dropped, raw and honest. "That's exactly how helplessness feels, Gabriel. Being kept in the dark. Being told it's for your own good." The silence that followed stretched taut, almost unbearable. Then he exhaled, a controlled release of breath that sounded like surrender wrapped in frustration. "You want the full truth?" he asked. "Fine." His voice sharpened, brittle with tension. "There are 6 cartel enforcers looking for you. They have your description, your license plate, and they're monitoring people connected to you." My heart stuttered. "Who?" "Your editor," he said. Your landlord. The barista at the coffee shop you go to every Friday. They've all been approached. He paused. This is what I was trying to spare you. The fear didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly, cold and methodical. Mark. My landlord. A barista who knew my order by heart. Their faces flashed in my mind. Ordinary people unknowingly entangled in a war I'd stepped into. You should have told me, I whispered. Not angry now, just tired. I can handle hard truths. What I can't handle is being blind while danger circles the people I care about. Gabriel ran a hand over his face, the first crack in his composure I'd seen since the night at Lucia's. He turned toward the window, shoulders tight, voice low. I don't think you're fragile, Lauren. I think you're extraordinary. That's the problem. He paused, the weight of years settling into his words. I've spent most of my life controlling everything. Territory, operations, threats. Control keeps people alive in my world. He looked back at me then, expression unarmored, something vulnerable flickering just beneath the surface. But you challenge that. You make me want to share control, not hoard it. And that terrifies me more than anything the cartel can do. His confession softened the anger, but didn't erase the truth between us. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. Then let me in, I said quietly. Not as someone you're protecting, but as someone standing beside you. Let me make informed choices. Let me be equal to the danger. Gabriel held my gaze for a long, unbroken moment. Then he nodded slowly. Complete honesty, he said. From now on. About threats. About operations. About anything that touches your safety. His voice steadied. But you have to trust my tactical judgment. When I tell you to move or stay still, you do it. I've survived because I listen to instinct. I can do that, I said. As long as you explain afterward. He exhaled, some of the tension easing from his frame. Deal. But the air between us wasn't done shifting. As he turned away, he spoke softly, almost to himself. My wife used to hate this too. The way I closed off when things turned dangerous. I froze. It was the first time he'd mentioned her without being prompted. She married me knowing what this life was, he went on. But knowing and living it are different things. His voice cracked just slightly. I gave her 3 years of marriage and a lifetime of delayed promises. Loss hung in the room like smoke. I stepped beside him, understanding settling deeper than words. You think loving someone makes you vulnerable, I said. But shutting them out does the same thing. It just hurts both people. Gabriel turned to me, something raw in his expression. You wrote help on a napkin and looked at me like I could still be good, he murmured. You don't know what that did. But before I could answer, his phone rang sharp, urgent, slicing the moment in half. He listened silently, eyes hardening. When? He said. How many? Secure all routes. He lowered the phone slowly. The cartel is preparing to move, he said. All remaining women will be transported from the warehouse within 72 hours. The war we'd stepped into had just accelerated, and everything that came next would demand more from us than either of us had yet imagined. The 72 hours that followed felt like living inside a ticking clock, every second sharpening into something heavy and electric. Gabriel transformed overnight. Gone was the man who kissed me in the dim quiet of the safe house. In his place stood a strategist, precise, calculating, lethal in his focus. His phone never stopped vibrating. Luca came and went with updates that made my pulse sprint. The entire Richetti network moved like a single organism preparing for battle. Meanwhile, I worked with a fury I didn't know lived inside me. I reorganized timelines, built cross-reference files, triple-checked every victim profile. My laptop turned into a command center of its own, glowing deep into the night as I pieced together the last fragments of the truth. With each line of data, each timestamp, each face staring back at me from a missing persons report, the weight of what we were racing against pushed deeper into my veins. Gabriel made good on his promise of total honesty. He told me everything, every rumor, every intercepted message, every movement the cartel made. "They're preparing transport trucks," he said on the second evening, dropping onto the couch beside me. "Modified panels. Soundproofed compartments. They'll move the women before sunrise on Friday." "How many?" I asked, voice thin. 17 alive," he said softly. "One confirmed dead." His tone didn't waver, but something in his eyes did. "She was killed before you started investigating. She never made it out of the warehouse." Grief hit me like a blow. I closed my eyes, seeing her face from the file. A life that might have been saved had the world cared sooner. But grief hardened into resolve. I spent the next hours compiling a 40-page packet: victim histories, cartel movements, timestamps, vehicle descriptions, supply records. When I finished, I encrypted everything and sent it anonymously to an FBI inbox used for whistleblowing. It was the kind of document that forced action, the kind that couldn't be ignored, the kind that could spark an entire federal firestorm. Gabriel watched me send it, expression unreadable. "You just lit the biggest fuse in this city," he murmured. "And you did it without blinking." "Someone has to," I whispered. On the third evening, as the sky bruised into night, Gabriel called me into the living room. The monitors showed an aerial view of the port, grainy, pulsing with movement. "It happens tonight," he said. "My men will corner the cartel inside the warehouse. The FBI will move 5 minutes after. They think they'll be raiding a standard trafficking cell. They won't know my people cleared the path first." My chest tightened. "And if something goes wrong?" Gabriel's gaze softened just a fraction. "Something always goes wrong. The goal is to make sure nothing catastrophic does." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Stay here. Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone except Luca. I'm not asking this as a man in charge. I'm asking because I know exactly what's out there tonight." "I hate waiting," I admitted, breath shaky. "I know." He brushed a thumb across my cheek, a fleeting touch full of things neither of us had the luxury to say. "But when this is over, those women will be free. And you'll have the story that exposes an entire empire." The hours crawled by like wounded things. I paced until the carpet felt worn beneath my feet, checking the monitors, checking my phone, checking the clock. Midnight passed. Then 1. Then 2. Each minute eating into my nerves like acid. When my phone finally buzzed at 2:14 a.m., I answered before the first vibration ended. "It's done," Gabriel said, voice low but steady. "The women are safe. No casualties on our side. The FBI has them now." Relief punched through me so hard my knees nearly buckled. I exhaled a breath I'd been holding for days. But then he added the part that changed everything. "One of the cartel lieutenants escaped. They retaliated before we cleared out. They hid an apartment 2 blocks away from you. Luca took a bullet, but he's alive. He's being transported now." The world tilted. "Is he?" "He'll make it," Gabriel said. "Only because someone in that building knew enough first aid to keep him conscious long enough for backup." His breath sounded ragged for the first time. "Lauren, that person was you." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "You practiced those steps yesterday," he said. "And when the shot went off, you didn't freeze. You ran. You saved his life." The truth landed slowly, fiercely. Danger was no longer just circling. It was coming straight for us. and before dawn it would demand its next price. The attack didn't hit like a single moment. It rolled in like a storm, slow at first, then violent enough to shake the bones of the world I thought I understood. By the time Gabriel's SUV screeched into the underground garage of the safe house, sirens were already echoing distantly through the city, and the metallic taste of fear coated the back of my throat. 2 guards flanked the elevator, their jackets torn, sleeves darkened with soot. When the doors slid open, chaos waited on the other side. Furniture overturned, walls splintered, smoke still curling upward in thin gray fingers. The air smelled like gunpowder and hot metal. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process that the place Gabriel swore was untouchable looked like a war had torn straight through it. Then I saw the streaks of blood on the floor, fresh, dark, smeared across tile in frantic lines that told a story my heart wasn't ready to hear. "Luca," I whispered, though I already knew. Gabriel didn't answer. He pushed past me, following the trail into the living room where medics huddled around a stretcher, their hands moving fast. Luca lay there pale and shaking, breath shallow, bandages pressed into his side. His eyes found mine for half a second, unfocused but aware. "Told you. I'd keep you safe," he rasped, and something inside me cracked. I dropped to my knees beside him, memories flashing his easy jokes, the silent way he stood guard, the way he pulled me behind him that night at Lucia's without thinking twice. "He'll make it," the medic said, almost reading my thoughts. But the bullet tore clean through. If pressure hadn't been applied immediately, he'd have bled out before we arrived. Pressure. The technique Gabriel had drilled into me. The one I'd practiced with annoyed impatience. The one that had kept Luca alive long enough for help to find him. Gabriel knelt opposite me, jaw clenched so hard it looked carved from stone. For a moment we just stared at each other through the rush of sirens, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the heavy truth between us. "They weren't supposed to know this location," he said quietly. "Someone leaked it." A shiver rippled down my spine. "The cartel. No, they don't move like this. This was surgical." His gaze darkened. "This came from inside my family." The word family landed heavier than bullets. Betrayal wasn't just dangerous, it was sacred violation in Gabriel's world. A crossing of lines that demanded consequences. The medics lifted Luca onto a gurney and rushed him out. Gabriel didn't follow. He stood in the center of the wrecked apartment, surveying the damage as if cataloging each wound, calculating what it meant, what it cost, what it required next. "This wasn't retaliation," he murmured. "This was provocation. Someone wants a war." My voice cracked. "And they were willing to kill Luca just to start it?" He looked up at me, eyes unreadable. "Not just Luca." A beat of silence. Heavy. Cold. "True. They were sending a message to me," he said. "And the fastest way to get to me is through you." The words landed like a punch to the ribs. My heartbeat stuttered. The room tilted. "Gabriel," I whispered. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," he cut in, stepping closer, voice low. "But the moment you picked up that camera at the port, you became part of it." Another step. "The moment you walked out of Lucia's alive, you became a threat." His hand brushed mine barely. "And the moment I took your napkin, you became someone worth targeting." Fear flickered through me, sharp and hot, but it wasn't the panic from the night at the restaurant. This was different. This was the kind that came with clarity. The kind that said the world had split, and I needed to choose which side of the fracture I stood on. Gabriel lifted my chin gently, forcing my eyes to meet his. "They're not trying to kill you, Lauren," he said. "They're trying to break me." I swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" His jaw set, expression shifting into something lethal, controlled, terrifying to anyone but me. "Now," he said. "I take back control of my house." A distant siren wailed, then fell silent, leaving only the hum of broken light fixtures and the pounding of my own heartbeat. Gabriel stepped away, pulling out his phone, voice going cold. "Call everyone in," he said. "We start tonight." Because someone had drawn first blood and Gabriel planned to answer. The house in Englewood Cliffs had always felt too quiet, too controlled, like every sound inside it had learned to obey Gabriel. But that night, as the storm rolled across the river and thunder rattled the window panes, the silence held something different, an undertow of betrayal thick enough to taste. Gabriel stood at the center of the study, the same room where he had once placed coffee beside me with a soft good morning. Now his posture was steel. His suit jacket hung open, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing the tension carved deep into his forearms. Shadows stretched long across the walls as men filtered in one by one, faces grim, eyes trained on him like soldiers awaiting orders. I stayed near the doorway, not hidden, not involved, but close enough to hear every word. I wasn't supposed to be part of this world, but the truth was simple and unignorable. This world had already swallowed me whole. Gabriel spoke without raising his voice. Someone inside this family leaked the safe house location. His gaze swept across the room, sharp as glass. Not the cartel. Not an outsider. One of us. A murmur rippled through the men, shock, anger, denial, until Gabriel lifted one hand. Silence returned instantly. Luca's blood was still drying on my clothes, a dark reminder that these weren't theoretical threats or strategic maneuvers. They were bullets, bodies, consequences. Gabriel pointed to the map pinned across the table: routes, warehouses, assets marked in red. Only 3 people had access to the exact address, he said. Luca, Carlo, and Anthony. At the sound of his cousin's name, the room shifted. Not in surprise, no one looked surprised, but in recognition. Anthony, the ambition that never slept, the resentment simmering for decades, the envy sharpened year after year. It all hung in the air like smoke. Carlo stepped forward first, his hands raised. "Gabriel, I swear on my children I didn't." "I know," Gabriel cut in. "Calm. Deadly. You've served this family longer than I've been alive. You've never once given me reason to question your loyalty." Carlo's shoulders sagged in visible relief. Then all eyes landed on the empty chair in the corner. Anthony's chair. The message was unmistakable. Gabriel's voice dropped lower. "He didn't show up tonight because he knows I would know." The logic hit like a hammer. Clean. Irrefutable. Terrifying. "He wanted to provoke me," Gabriel continued. "Wanted to make me look reckless. Wanted Lauren dead so he could call me compromised." My breath caught. The words felt ice cold, even though I had already suspected it. Gabriel didn't turn toward me, but the flicker of tension across his jaw told me he was fully aware of the weight those words carried. Because this wasn't just a political play. It was personal, cruel, calculated. "And he nearly succeeded," Gabriel said, pacing slowly. "But instead of breaking me, he made something else clear." His gaze lifted, locking onto every man in the room. "I don't protect the family just because it's tradition. I protect it because I protect what's mine." A quiet shift rolled through his men, not fear, not deference, but allegiance willingly offered. Then his gaze found mine. A softer flicker, almost imperceptible. But I saw it, felt it, understood it. And it was enough to tighten the air inside my lungs with something dangerously close to devotion. Gabriel turned back to the room. "Anthony leaves New Jersey within 48 hours. If he doesn't, he will not leave at all. No shouting, no threats, just reality spoken by a man who didn't bluff." One of the older men stepped forward, nodding respectfully. "We'll make sure he understands." But Gabriel wasn't finished. "And if he tries to touch her again," his voice turned razor thin, "I'll bury him myself." The meeting ended with quiet goodbyes and heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. When the last man disappeared into the night, Gabriel finally faced me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Rain hammered softly against the glass. "He wanted to tear this family apart," Gabriel said. "But he only managed to show me how much of it is worth fighting for." His voice faltered barely, but enough. Enough for a truth to settle in my chest like a stone thrown into deep water. Anthony hadn't just fractured the family, he had revealed exactly what and who Gabriel was willing to bleed for. The fallout didn't arrive with gunfire this time. It arrived quietly, almost politely, wrapped in glossy paper and cheap sensationalism. A tabloid headline hit the stands before sunrise, my name printed in bold letters beside a grainy, long-lens photograph of me stepping out of Gabriel's car. "Crime boss romance? Journalist behind trafficking exposé seen with notorious Ricchetti heir." The photo wasn't even sharp, but the implication was. By the time I woke up, my phone was buzzing nonstop, editors, colleagues, strangers, all wanting answers I couldn't give. Mark left 3 voicemails in a row, each more frantic than the last. "Lauren, call me back. Immediately. This is going to explode." I sat on the edge of the bed, breath tight, the article open on my phone. They had timeline screenshots. Dinners I'd never realized had been surveilled. A single moment at the Waldorf, Gabriel's hand on the small of my back cropped, and captioned like evidence in a courtroom. They painted me as compromised, unethical, emotionally entangled with the very world I claimed to expose. Every word was designed to gut my credibility. Every photo selected to make me look guilty. Every detail curated to turn truth into scandal. And worst of all, they had just enough facts to make the lie believable. When Gabriel walked into the bedroom, shirt unbuttoned, hair still damp from the shower, I saw the second blow land. His expression went cold, not surprised, not confused, just cold. "Anthony," he said immediately. No hesitation. No doubt. He wanted a war he couldn't win, so he started the one he could. The truth snapped into place so fast it felt like whiplash. This wasn't the cartel. This wasn't federal pressure. This was family. Betrayal wearing a familiar surname. Gabriel took the phone from my hand, reading the headline with an expression carved from stone. "He thinks this will force you away from me," he murmured. "He thinks destroying your credibility destroys my leverage." "But it destroys my career," I whispered. "Everything I've worked for. Everything I've bled to prove." Gabriel's eyes met mine, dark, steady, dangerous in their calm. "And that," he said, "is why he chose this route instead of bullets." I didn't answer. Couldn't. The room felt too small, the air too thin. My mind raced through every implication. My editor, the paper, the survivors I interviewed, the women still recovering. Would people think I fabricated? Lied? Colluded with criminals? Journalism lived on trust, and Anthony had just set fire to mine. Gabriel crossed to me, kneeling so we were level. "Look at me." I did, even though my chest felt like it was caving in. "You're not alone in this," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong. And Anthony doesn't get to decide your truth or your future." But his certainty couldn't drown out the rising panic pressing against my ribs. "Gabriel, people will think I'm sleeping with my source. They'll think my investigation was biased. They'll tear apart every case I work on for years." He took my hands, thumbs brushing the inside of my wrists. "Then we show them who's really pulling strings." His voice dropped lower, fiercer. "Anthony wants chaos. He wants doubt. But doubt works both ways. And he just handed us proof of his intentions." Before I could respond, Luca appeared in the doorway, pale, bandaged, walking slowly but alive. "Boss," he said, voice rough. "We traced the leak. Photos, emails, payments. All roads lead to Anthony." Gabriel stood, the tension in his shoulders shifting from burden to purpose. "Send everything to my uncle," he ordered. "I want him to see exactly what his son has become." Luca nodded and left as quietly as he'd arrived. Then Gabriel turned back to me. "Get dressed," he said. "You're coming with me." My pulse stuttered. "Where?" "The family meeting," he replied. "If Anthony wants to drag you into this world, then you get to walk into it on your own terms." I hesitated. "Gabriel, these are criminals. These are the men who decide wars with handshakes." He stepped closer, voice gentler. "Yes. And tonight they'll learn who you really are. Not a scandal. Not a weakness. Not leverage." He reached for my hand, warm and steady. "They'll see the woman who helped save 17 lives. The woman who stood up to cartel enforcers. The woman who kept Luca alive. And the woman I choose to stand beside me." My throat tightened. Fear, resolve, anger, pride, everything tangled into one sharp breath. And then I nodded. "Okay, let's go." Because if Anthony had tried to destroy me with shadows and whispers, then facing his world in the open was the only answer that mattered. The drive to Atlantic City felt like traveling toward a verdict. Rain streaked across the SUV windows, blurring the neon reflections into a smear of color that reminded me of crime scene photographs, beautiful in a way that made you feel guilty for noticing. Gabriel sat beside me, silent, jaw tight, fingers tapping once against his knee before going still again. That, I'd learned, was his tell. It meant he wasn't angry. He was planning. The hotel was the kind with chandeliers the size of small planets and carpets that tried too hard to look expensive. Men in tailored suits filled the ballroom, speaking in low tones over whiskey that cost more than my rent. When Gabriel entered with me at his side, the conversations didn't stop, they shifted. Like someone had changed the temperature in the room. He didn't release my hand as we walked deeper inside. That alone sent a message. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't an outsider. I wasn't a weakness. I was someone he stood with, publicly, intentionally, irrevocably. The realization moved through the room like an electric current, tightening every spine. Then Anthony stepped into view. He looked polished, composed, too calm. He greeted Gabriel with a thin smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You brought your journalist," he said. "Bold, considering the circumstances." Gabriel didn't smile back. "Bold as sending fabricated photos to tabloids," he replied. "Or emailing reporters about a woman whose work saved 17 lives." Anthony's expression flickered only for a heartbeat, but I saw it. A crack in his confidence. "You think dragging her into this room makes your point?" Anthony scoffed. "It only proves you're compromised." He turned toward me, eyes slicing downward. "Tell me, Lauren, how does it feel to watch your reputation burn because of him?" I didn't flinch. Not this time. Not after everything I'd survived. "My reputation is built on facts," I said evenly. "Yours is built on resentment." A low murmur rippled through the room. Not approval. Not disapproval. Observation. Judgment weighing itself. Anthony's jaw clenched. "You don't belong here." "Then why are you so afraid I'm standing here?" I countered. Gabriel's hand found the small of my back, steady, reassuring, discreet support without overshadowing me. "You leaked the photos," I added. "You tried to destroy my credibility because you couldn't destroy his." Anthony turned red. "You don't know this world. You don't understand how dangerous he is." "I understand exactly how dangerous you are," I said. "And that's the difference." A hush fell. Even the air felt poised on the edge of something sharp. Gabriel finally stepped forward, voice dangerously quiet. Enough. He pulled a folder from his jacket and tossed it onto the table between them. Emails, transaction logs, photo metadata, proof. Anthony stared at the evidence, his own fingerprints pasted across every betrayal. The family patriarch, a man with silver hair and the kind of gaze that could silence armies, approached. He sifted through the pages slowly, deliberately. When he looked up, even Anthony seemed to shrink. "Is this true?" the old man asked. His voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Anthony swallowed. "It's exaggerated." "Gabriel is twisting. Is it true?" the old man repeated. Anthony hesitated a fraction. Too long silence carved the room open. Then the patriarch nodded once. "A decision. A verdict. A sentence. You leave tomorrow," he said. "For Rome. Permanently. You will not return." A gasp rippled quietly through the room. Exile was worse than punishment in a family like this. It was erasure. Anthony staggered. "You're choosing him? Over your own blood?" The old man's eyes hardened. "I'm choosing the man who protected our territory, saved innocent lives, and upheld our code. A beat. You endangered all of us. For jealousy." Anthony's shoulders fell. For the first time, he looked small. The meeting dissolved after that, men dispersing like smoke. Gabriel didn't speak until the last suit disappeared down the corridor. Then he exhaled slow, deep, the kind of breath someone releases after holding a weight too heavy for too long. He turned to me. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Stand up to him. Challenge him. Risk being targeted." I stepped closer. "You didn't have to save me at Lucia's." His gaze softened. "That's different." "No," I said gently. "It's not." The quiet between us wasn't empty. It was full of things admitted, unspoken, understood. For the first time since the tabloid dropped, the fear coiled in my chest loosened. Because here, in this room of dangerous men and heavier truths, I'd finally seen it clearly. Gabriel hadn't chosen me as a liability, that he'd chosen me as an equal. Peace didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived quietly, in the small spaces where danger used to live. 3 weeks after the family meeting, life settled into something that felt almost unreal, a calm built from the ruins of everything we had survived. My trafficking investigation ran on the front page of the Tribune, the headline crisp, uncompromised, fierce. National papers picked it up within days. Journalism conferences invited me to speak. Survivor advocacy groups reached out with gratitude that felt too big to hold. And through it all, I wrote with the same sharpness as before, only now, I carried 17 faces with me in every story. Gabriel kept his promise too. Anthony left for Rome under watchful eyes and did not return. The cartel's East Coast operation collapsed entirely. Arrests stacked up. The port stayed clean, brutally, unmistakably clean. And Gabriel, he existed in a strange balance between shadow and sunlight. Some days he returned home before dinner, slipping off his jacket like any man coming back to the person waiting for him. Other days he left before dawn, phone vibrating with problems only a crime boss could handle. But he always came back, always found me, always reached for me like gravity had assigned him no other direction. One evening, Luca appeared at my office with a soccer ball under one arm and a gap-toothed daughter peeking from behind his legs. "She wants to thank you," he said. Sophia stepped forward, thrusting a crayon drawing into my hands. 2 stick figures holding hands beneath the sun. One had long hair. The other wore a suit. "Daddy says you saved us," she whispered. That night, I sat on the back patio of Gabriel's house, warm air brushing my skin as dusk settled over Englewood Cliffs. I watched the city glow in the distance, thinking of the girl who vanished too soon, the women we saved, and the man who had stood between me and death more than once. Gabriel joined me silently, setting 2 glasses of wine between us. "Mark called," he said. "You're nominated for another award." I laughed softly. He said the same thing to me. I told him awards don't matter. "They matter to him," Gabriel said. "And whether you want to believe it or not, they matter to the families you helped." His voice was gentle, but the truth in it rooted deep. We fell into quiet. Not tense, not uncertain, just quiet, comfortable. The kind of silence you share only when there's nothing left to prove. Then he set his wine down, turned fully toward me and said, "Marry me." There was no ring, no rehearsed monologue, no staged moment meant to impress. Just the man I loved offering the simplest truth of his life. "That's not a question," I murmured. He smiled, rare and unguarded. "Then here's the question. Will you marry me?" I thought of the safe house, the bullet holes, the napkin with the word help, the warehouse raid, the 17 women stepping into daylight. The way Gabriel said my name the first night he told me to trust him. And I realized something so simple it felt inevitable. Chaos had brought us together, but choice kept us here. "Yes," I whispered. "Of course I will." 2 weeks later, in a garden behind his house, under strings of white lights swaying in the summer breeze, we said our vows. Mine were honest. His were quiet and fierce. Lucas stood beside him as best man, still recovering but alive. Mark stood beside me, awkward in a suit but proud. After the judge pronounced us married, Gabriel kissed me with a certainty that left no room for doubt or fear or hesitation. Life didn't magically turn simple after that. I continued writing hard stories: corruption, misconduct, injustice woven through New Jersey like a second bloodstream. People questioned my objectivity. They always would. But my reporting stayed sharp, clean, unshakable. And those who tried to say otherwise learned quickly that truth doesn't bend just because they want it to. Gabriel negotiated contracts, resolved disputes, navigated the lines between legitimate business and the gray space his family had lived in for generations. Some days he came home exhausted. Some nights he came home bleeding. But he always came home. 6 months into our marriage, on a quiet Sunday morning, he brushed a strand of hair from my face and whispered, "You know, I never thought I'd have something like this again." I touched his hand. Neither did I. We existed in that space between darkness and light, law and loyalty, fear and hope. Our lives weren't perfect. They weren't safe. They weren't simple. But they were honest, fiercely built, and ours. Some stories end at rescue. Some end at revenge. Ours ended at neither. Ours began the moment we chose each other anyway. And every morning after, we chose again. My favorite part was when she held her ground in that dimly lit restaurant, proving she wasn't just a survivor, she was the spark that turned fear into justice. What was your favorite moment of justice in her story? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of courage, danger, and unexpected love. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.